What's up, guys? Today we are reviewing a game that I played recently. This was a 3-minute game. I was playing against an NM, not sure who, but this was just on chess.com in the pool, so let's get started. So I was white in this game, and the opening, nothing really interesting. We can kind of go through that a bit quicker. I was trying for one of those openings where I don't really castle and I go for g4, g5 early, but it didn't really pan out. You guys will see. Yes, I decided to play knight f1 just because I wanted to try for, playing g4 and then g3. But they played bishop e6 here. And yeah, my plans of going for g4, knight g3 ideas kind of don't work anymore. So this was a good way for black to play against this. So I'm not castled, but my king is pretty safe here in the center. So I still decided to go g4. I still thought if I could go g5, I could maybe start something. But now they play queen d3 here. So I think this is the first, I guess critical point for what to do here, because in this position there's different ways I can go here. I can keep trying to attack with playing something like g5 or knight f5. Maybe not knight f5 because I'd probably lose this pawn, but I could go for that. Or I have another option which I went with in the game, which is to simplify here and go into an endgame, and I decided to go for that because I thought my pieces are pretty well positioned here. I have pressure here. My knight again can come to f5. But I think most importantly here is that my king is still in the center, and when we're getting into an endgame, having the king in the center is really useful. So playing takes here, takes, and king e2 here is very important. This is the critical idea of why I think going into an endgame here is decent, because now my king is pretty active. It's guarding a lot of squares that their pieces want to come into, protecting the knight, but also attacking the rook and opening up space for my rook to come out. And I was okay with this position here for white. So they decided to go back and b4 here. I think this b4, b5 ideas could be strong, because if they don't protect this pawn correctly, man can take it, which is what happened in the game. After b5, they went knight to e7 and just let me take here. And I thought at this point I'm doing well here, but things do get tricky later on. So in this position here again, we have to stop and think a bit, because obviously right now I'm attacking this pawn, so I have a potential to take it. And I had to think about, am I worried about what they're doing here? I think their threat is something to do like knight d5, knight f4, which I don't know if at the time I saw it, because it is more annoying than I thought, because I just took the pawn, and this kind of led into some trouble here for me. So after takes here, I thought I'd be okay after just moving king e2 and then check and then king f3. But actually here there's an issue for white. This is definitely something that I would pause and think about what to play here for black. But yeah, this turned out to be a bit more concerning than I thought. Even if they don't see the right move here, it's still very annoying. So knight d3. So now I have to watch out for this rook check idea, or they'll win my pawn. So I decided to go king g2. And I don't really want to draw here. I'm up, I think, 2 pawns here. Let's see, 4, 7 against 5. Yeah, so 2 pawns here. So don't really want to draw, even though it is actually pretty equal here. I just think that there's still more to play for here. I think I can try to win this. So I wanted to keep playing on. So rook f1. But yeah, I'm running into some difficulties here. I take, because this pawn is weak, this pawn is weak. So now I just take another pawn, and here I make a blunder by playing king g1, because I forgot that this pawn is hanging. So here maybe, what would be a better move? I mean, there's a lot of better moves than that, but I guess this is a consideration. It looks kind of strange. I could also just play e5, give them this pawn. Something like e5 takes here, king here. And I don't mind giving up a second pawn back because I have these ones running. As long as I'm not going to get checkmated here or perpetual checked, then these two pawns should win. So playing something like this, just giving back a few pawns, is probably the right way to go. But yeah, I played king g1, missing this check completely. So now I'm in some trouble again. So luckily they don't take here. Taking here seems good for black. Instead they played check. I come out with my king. And not king e3 yet. I played e5 first. Yeah, so I want to play e5 because I want to open up a space for my knight to come to e4. I thought this would be really strong if I can get that, as well as just give my king a little bit of breathing room. Potentially maybe coming out this way at some point. So king back. Probably king e3 was a little bit better, but I felt safer here. And now here, I still felt in a lot of trouble because of this pawn. There's just so much pressure here that I decided I just want to trade off rooks. And if I can trade off a pair of rooks, this is going to be a lot easier to make sure that I don't lose and I can still play to win. So I decided to play rook a1 here with the idea that if they take here, which I'm assuming they most likely will, I have rook a7 check. The only way they can get out of this check is either block with the rook where I take it. So this is just what happened in the game, so I'll just show you. But if they bring the king up, then I have ways to play check and take the rook at worst. So I knew that I'd be trading off rooks by playing rook a1. And I thought, yeah, in this position, trading off, I mean, if we go back to here, trading off this rook for this rook seems like a great deal for me. My rook is terrible, and this one is making this rook terrible. So that'd be a trade I'd definitely like. So that's why I went for that. And now this is where we get into some interesting stuff, because here it looks pretty much completely drawn. The pawns are equal. There's not much pieces left on the board. No one really seems to have an advantage here. But here in this position, I came up with some kind of plan, and I don't think my opponent really had much to do, and that was basically the difference in this game. So this is why it's really important to have some kind of a plan. So I just checked a few times and went back and forth a few times. I don't actually want the draw, but I just want to go back and forth and see what they're thinking. Maybe they'll make a mistake. But they went back and forth a few times as well. So nothing really changed. So now knight e4. I think this is a pretty important move. Just defends the pawn, guards a lot of squares in the center. So now f3. And now here, this is where my planning started coming in. So I guess even earlier, I started coming up with a plan around here, in that the only difference in this position is that I have a passed pawn. The 2 versus 3 probably is not going to lead to too much. I'm not too worried about them creating some kind of problem there. I know that this pawn can be a problem if they don't deal with it, though, because it's already passed. So my plan is going to be to somehow start helping this pawn promote, and that's going to have to involve my rook and my king at some point. So I know I have a lot of time as well, so I don't have to rush anything here, but I know that I need to start looking towards how to improve this pawn. So you can see that the next few moves are kind of dedicated towards preparing to protect this pawn so that I can start helping it. So putting my knight on e4, this pawn is pretty solid now. So now my plan is going to be to bring my king over and to start using my king to help push this pawn. So that's my next plan. And here, black doesn't really seem to have a plan, and their plan might have to do something with stopping this pawn and trying to win this pawn. But you can see here they played check, which is okay. It's not really doing much. And then they played check here, and I think this one starts to show that they don't really have a plan, because this check doesn't really accomplish that much. So after check, if anything, actually it just helps me with my plan. So if they knew what my plan was, which is to go king here, king here, king here, they realize that these knight checks that they've played aren't really helping. It's just helping me get to where I want to quicker. And you can see that me having a plan and them not having a plan is already turning into a position where suddenly now white has really good chances to win. So here, I actually missed a tactic here. This knight is almost trapped, so I can go rook a2 and trap it. I didn't see that. Here, I just decided to play check a few times. I wanted to see if they would play king f7 and then just let me, win easily. But they realized that I have knight f7 check, so then I play king e2. And king e2 is again going back to the original plan. I want to play king d3, but this knight's in the way, so I take a little detour to e2, kick it to somewhere else. Now I have king d3. Now rook c6. And I could play c4 probably right away. I was unsure because I was low on time here at this point, I believe. I was unsure if that after check here, check and stuff. I was wondering if they have some kind of perpetual check or if I have to move my king and they can take the pawn. So I wanted to move the king first. But yeah, I think with a few extra seconds, c4 looks pretty easy here. But knight king d4 is with the idea to go c4, and so king e5, yeah, not the greatest move again. Again, I should be playing c4 here and continue with the plan. But again, I was unsure about the checks, but the checks don't really lead to that much. So king e5, and now knight to e2. So actually, I think this is what I was trying to get them to play by playing king e5. So now I want to play c4. Obviously, they can take it with their rook, and I like where my rook is at, is cutting off their king. I don't really want to bring it back to a3 here. So I thought this was a nice move. King d5 here. If they take the pawn, I take their rook. So they have to move their rook, and now I get to play c4. So now knight check. King here again. If they take my pawn, I take their knight. I'm happy with that. And I didn't really want to play it this way because I didn't really want to let knight e6. I thought that would cause me some trouble again. So king e5. I was hoping for knight d3 check, because if they play knight d3, I just play king d4, where their knights no longer have checks, and I'll be able to play c5. c5 is really the goal of the position. Once I get in c5, my knight is defending the pawn, and that makes it so that pawn is pretty secure. I can start using my king a bit more freely, but in this position, my king has to be somewhat near my pawn. So this is what happened. So I did get knight d3. And now c5. And yeah, now you can see it went from a position that was pretty equal, but black didn't really have much of a plan. There's not as much for black to plan for. And I had a plan as white where I just want to get my king involved and start pushing this pawn. And you can see suddenly that equal position is turned into a position where I think almost everyone would prefer to be white here. I think white might already be winning at this point now. And also another thing to notice is just the difference of the kings, where my king is here very active, their king is very passive and not really doing too much, is stuck in the back. So knight check. So I have to be a bit careful here. King d6 is very tempting. That would be the move I would want to play, but there's knight b5 check. So there's still things to worry about with tactics. So actually, I think playing king here might be decent. There's no discovery check with the knight. I just played here instead. So now rook b7, and now suddenly this knight is so far away. King d6, and yeah, once I get this pawn here, now you can see this is gonna be a problem for them. So at this point they just sack their knight, and we'll just look at the rest of the game real quickly. I think I could have finished this cleaner, but eventually I got a take here, and I thought this was a nice little maneuver. King f6, and then king g6, and they can't stop checkmate here. So okay, that's it for that game review. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it, hope you learned something, and see you next time.